Humboldt County is home to many national and international exporters. Tonight on North Coast Perspectives, we look at manufacturing and sustainability with Ron Samuels of Marimba One, Michael Christian with American Hydroponics, and Mary Keehn from Cypress Grove Chevre. Coming up next on North Coast Perspectives. What do exotic hardwoods, plastics, and goat's milk have in common? In Humboldt County, they are the raw materials that are turned into high-quality products and add to our gross national product. Our guests are the founders, entrepreneurial spirits, and energy behind three of our finest exporters of goods. Hello, I'm Julie Fulkerson, and I'm the host of North Coast Perspectives. I'd like to introduce our group tonight. Ron Samuels is the founder and owner of Marimba One. He is a musician, innovator, and creator of a company that exports instruments worldwide. His customers are world-famous musicians and play with international symphonies and ensembles. Michael Christian is president and CEO of American Hydroponics and has literally planted the seeds of agricultural success in such places in Honduras, Japan, Kuwait. His company addresses water and land conservation. And Mary Keehn is the founder of Cypress Grove Chevre, and she has referred to herself as a hippie who got carried away making goat cheese for her family. Her creations now win international gold medals and are featured in national and international publications. She serves America's finest restaurants and can be purchased locally. Now, each of you has achieved international success, but I am sure the seeds of your work and your current business have grown dramatically in the years that you've been working with your various early concepts. So let's start with you, Mary. Let's hear your story. Just give us a short tale of the early startup. What were you thinking?
That's exactly what my family said. What are you thinking? I had goats, dairy goats, as a source of healthy fresh milk for my family, and got a little carried away. We lived in rural southern Humboldt, and I was making cheese for friends and family. And Dixie opened Larapin Cafe here, and she said, well, if you'll make cheese, I'll buy it. And I said, cool, I'll do that. I had really not much idea of what I was going to end up doing. It was just a way to use the milk of my goats at that time. So I didn't have a grand business plan, or it's just been
just out of a family need.
Yep, exactly.
Launched by one restaurant.
One restaurant and Los Bagels too. So the two of, we all three started at the same time.
Well, I'm going to come back to you because of course the story expands rather dramatically. But Michael, tell us what the first moments of your genesis were.
The first moments, well, my partner and I invented a horticultural light rotator. And in order to see if the thing worked correctly, we had to use some kind of system to test it. So we tried a hydroponic system. We just made it out of bus tubs. And then meanwhile, I set up a system for my kid who took it to a science fair and then won it. Grew this like heads of romaine lettuce that were huge. So gradually one thing led to the other, and then being from a farming background, living in Humboldt for many years, we decided, wow, wouldn't it be cool to grow gardens in cities? So we invented a baby bloomer and a veggie table. And then one thing led to another, and we got into commercial growing when we went to New Zealand and Australia and discovered what they were doing there, and we brought it back to America. And then from then on, we've been producing these systems.
So really just out of a very small concept. We're going to go back to you as well. In the meantime, Ron, what exactly were you thinking? Because again, your company is quite different now than I'm sure it was in the early days.
Mm-hmm. I first came upon the marimba and fell in love with the sound. And I was totally broke, had no money, and so I started taking marimba lessons up at HSU. And when summer came around, I figured out, once again, I had no money to buy a marimba. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll go ahead and build a marimba. So I went ahead and bought wood and tubing, things like that, and having no woodworking experience or anything at all, really building anything. And the process was so interesting that I became quickly addicted into figuring out how to build a better and better marimba. I wanted a nice marimba. My first one came out so poorly that I just had to have a better one. And the first one was really interesting because it really presented all the problems, engineering, acoustical, everything that I would ever really come across. And so I've spent basically many, many years now refining the marimba and sort of pursuing what it ultimately can be.
Can you remember more about that? I know it was many years ago when you were in that very early design stage when you decided you were going to make your own marimba. What were you thinking that you decided you could make a marimba? That is quite an extraordinary leap, but from not having woodworking skills to actually building a fine, well, you said it wasn't a great instrument, but you had that in mind.
You know, I mean, I knew that I really didn't know how to really do anything at the time, but I was so into it and so enthusiastic, and I was so curious about it. It was like the marimba itself was pulling me in, and I just thought it'd be possible. It didn't really seem like it couldn't happen.
Just because you wanted to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think I want to stress that because it's important for all of us to hear. What is it that plants the initial thought and the initial seed, and then it's not necessarily based on experience. You just decided this was it.
Yes.
So, Michael, tell us a little bit, again, going back to your earliest moments with this concept. What made you think you could do this?
Well, I'm incapable of working for anybody.
I see.
So you got to invent. If you're going to live in Humboldt County, you need to invent something. Well, you know, good ideas are cheap. So when you get something that really lights you up, you want to take every strength you have to be able to build capacity to generate it. So there's no way I would have known what would have happened to American hydroponics now. I mean, we're international, and we're on rooftops in New York. It just develops its own momentum from a little tiny beginning of that, yeah, this is possible. Let's just continue. Let's keep moving forward.
So a couple of your seeds were you knew you wanted to work for yourself, so you were just a natural entrepreneur. And you said good ideas are cheap?
Yeah, you know, everyone goes, well, let's do this. We can make this thing, make $1 million. Well, yeah, right. So you just, you have to be lit up by what you want to create. And then you draw people around you who are like-minded, and then you eventually get momentum behind this thing and create it in the world. And it's a profound process. And that's why hanging out with these guys, I mean, it's the same, we're doing the same thing.
The same thing with completely different raw materials.
Right.
And probably in a lot of ways different skills, obviously, are required to do what you're doing.
But we all had bumped into the same stuff as running a business.
And we will talk more about bumping into that, what is that stuff. But Mary, let's hear a little bit more from you about sort of more of that. You started making cheese out of necessity to feed your family, and then you bumped into Dixie at Larapin and Dennis at Los Bagels. So what were the other early phases for you? What made you think that making goat cheese, nobody was doing that here?
No, nobody even liked goat cheese at that time. Actually, more often than not, people would say, oh, goat cheese, no thank you. Because the cheese that was coming to the United States at that time was coming from France by slow boat, and it was often sour by the time it reached here. It was primarily fresh goat cheese. So for me, it was a lot like Michael, where I knew I had to support my family. I had 4 daughters. I was a single mom. And I wanted a profession that would allow me to be at home when they came home from school. So, you know, I could milk the goats, get them off to school, go make cheese, come home when they got home. And it was a job for all the neighborhood children at the time, too. So they could come and I could keep an eye on them. They would put labels on the cheese, which is a pretty non-technical skill, but kept them busy. And it grew over time. You know, it was a slow process, but you know, I just love, there's so many parts to it, from animal husbandry to cheese making to, I talked about wearing different footwear instead of different hats, you know, so you have your barn boots, you have your cheese plant boots, and then you put on your high heels and go to town to try and sell it. So it was a footwear thing for me.
So interesting early phases for you really were about family and having your kids help out.
Yeah.
So they were taking responsibility and then hiring neighborhood kids to help out?
They would come and get in the little packaging room and put the labels on. They could play their music and chat, you know, and I would pay them by the tray of cheese that they labeled. So it was a fun project. We were 4-H family too, so we did, you know, showing the goats, everything from beginning to end.
What a great community model of economic development,
Yeah.
which is really what this series is about. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that aspect. Michael, you talked about bumps along the road and some of the various other phases. So when you start to talk about the dream, it all sounds very romantic and very possible, but I'm sure you didn't feel that way every day as you developed your company. So do you want to talk about some of the chapters that you went through to get to where you are now?
Yeah, well, make a lot of mistakes because you're not really, I didn't really do it to go into business. I didn't know all the domains of business I'd have to be, you know, at least minimally competent in until I hit a wall like cash flow. All of a sudden there's no cash. What, you know, I had to get a job to be in business. So, you know, one thing after another, you hang out with people like these guys. You go take courses like, you know, that you and I did, and we constantly are learning to build capacity so we could at least be minimally competent in all the domains of business, which is finance and inventory, you know, understanding spreadsheets, you know, profit and loss. So all that stuff kind of comes with it, and those are not easy just to get right off for guys like me, anyway. So I don't know. Do you have an easier time of it?
No, it's all been a challenge too in all those aspects, and also just trying to figure the instrument out, our endless obsession with understanding what's wrong. Our motto is in the business is we'll never do it that way again, and so you know I always coming upon something and going, oh, if we only change something, whether it's on the business side or the instrument side, we can improve it. And
so Michael's addressed some of the broader needs of a business of, you know, cash flow and managing, hiring, training, and so forth. What were some of the other things that you had to work yourself through? What were some of the chapters? You said redesigning the instrument. I would imagine you have a different level of engineering and technology required for your instruments. Can you give us an idea of what's involved?
Yes. The instrument is it's a funny thing, but it's ultimately designed by all the musicians who play it, and it's really been my job to listen to what people say, listen to their criticisms, and you know the praises, whatever positive they have to say about it, and then incorporate all those things into the instrument and change the engineering of it, like acoustically, because musicians will always speak in more of a poetic way of analogies of how they like to hear sound, and so it's really been my job and the people who work in acoustics at my business to really translate that into, well, how can we change how we tune the tone bars? How can we re-engineer the resonators to give this particular sound that we believe is what the musicians are saying after we translate their comments from poetry into more of a technical instrument building language? That's been the big challenge.
So I want you to tell us a little more about this, but first, who are these people, who are these musicians who are telling you what they want? The poets, the musical poets.
They've been people from really all over the world. The people who have my instruments, you know, from the U.S., for example, a woman named Nancy Zeltzman who'll be here for a Marimba festival this summer. Other people, Ivana Bilish, who will be playing with Eureka Symphony, I think in May. And so all these high-level musicians who've spent their lives devoted to music, who have, you know, a phenomenal ear and sense of the instrument, you know, they'll make comments, passing comments to me, and I do my best to take them to heart, and really go back sort of the drawing board, and discuss it with the crew who are making the instruments. How can we make it sound this particular way? How could we make it feel this way? And then build those things into the instrument and produce them afresh that new way.
That's probably something that most of us won't really be able to fully comprehend. I'm glad you can listen to the poets and the musicians and figure this out. It's fascinating. It's so unfamiliar to most of us, building an instrument.
Yeah, slightly obscure.
Yes, yes. And still you do it.
Happily.
So, Michael, say a little more about the, you must have a similar process. If you're talking about feeding people throughout the world, you might give us an idea of how many people are benefiting from your product and your growing systems, and how are you getting feedback?
Well, you know, when we design a system, everyone's unique. It could be from rooftops in New York to islands like Puerto Rico. They grow cilantro. Everyone has a different crop they're growing in a different climate, so the variables are enormous as far as how do you create the perfect climate for that crop, depending on where they are. And our instructions are just a work in progress. People are constantly calling us going, man, that was really hard to understand, or this, and then we're going, okay, so we redesign, we're making it clearer and clearer. But I figure with what we have going now, we probably have maybe 20, 30 acres in hydroponic production, feeding millions of people, you know, in the US and in the world. The systems are so prolific and grow food so fast and are so efficient that the volume is just enormous of how effective and how efficient these systems are.
Well, a picture's worth 1,000 words, so I know we'll have some. But say that, did you say how many acres feed 1 million people?
Well, if we have, figure 1/2 acre grows 12,000 plants a week. So imagine 20 acres.
A week.
I mean, I can't do the math right here, but they're growing, for instance, in less than half an acre in New York on a rooftop, they grow 100,000 pounds a year. And they distribute in with about a 10 square mile area. So you multiply that times sheer volume of acreage, that's an enormous quantity of produce, you know, in really small areas.
One of the reasons we want to do North Coast Perspectives here on Keehn is to let our audience know that these things are happening right here in our community. It's interesting to see how you're having an impact really on world hunger, and in your case on world arts. And Mary, you're right in the middle of all this between gourmet artistry, really. I mean, your cheeses are internationally award-winning. They are served in the finest restaurants, and I want you to say a little more about that. And they nourish people, and it came from your family's needs. So tell us a little more about some of the challenges that you've met along the way.
Well, in addition to all the business challenges, and I think entrepreneurs classically are not the best business people.
Yes,
I mean, we're idea
Idea
people.
people.
And so cheese in particular is a living, breathing thing. We make Humboldt Fog as our signature cheese. And it is, on the outside, there's an exterior mold that is alive. So one challenge was the first time we had an order for a pallet of cheese, I shipped it out not knowing that the inside would continue to heat and the whole center melted. So we designed a box that would allow perfect airflow and keep the cheese in happy conditions. So the paper we wrap it in is a custom-made paper that we design. The box is custom-made, so you can turn it over and make a little aging room out of it. So it's not just cheese making or selling cheese. There's all the intricacies of, you know, what will happen to it along the path. We ship it when it's young so that when it reaches the customer, it's ready to eat. So there's all those details. And then even going back a step, you know, we're starting with live animals that need proper care and nutrition. And you know, we want to have sustainable farming practices. We want our community to be able to be a center for animal husbandry. And goats don't get a lot of good press, really. So, You know, it's a little difficult. There's so many challenges. You know, cows produce the primary volume of milk, but goats have been the traditional milk source for humans forever, you know, since the beginning. So
you're not only looking at issues of employee training and hiring, but you're recruiting goats,
right.
Goat families, and they are producing goat babies. And so what happened that you found this to be necessary?
Well, at the beginning, I produced the milk, and then we bought milk locally. And then as time went on, I found I couldn't focus. We were a small group. And now that we have 50 plus employees, we realized that our farms were having difficulty being successful because goats are not small cows. They need specific management. So our idea in starting a dairy was, of course, we always need more milk because we're growing, but also to help have a farm that we could open up and educate and teach, you know, goat husbandry, you know, how to take care of them in humane practices. So we'll be certified humane in our dairy. And, you know, just how can you do all of those things? Because you can't, there's no book. Just like there's no book for marimbas or designing systems. And I think that's what the link is, that we love the challenge of creating and solving problems.
So you weren't just satisfied with the challenge of making the finest cheese, figuring out how to export it. You are now starting really from scratch with a large-scale goat farm where people are actually going to be able to learn more about goat husbandry.
Right. So we're taking goat husbandry to the more modern level as they do in Europe. So the goats will have a bracelet, and that bracelet will tell how much milk that goat produces, when she last had her immunizations, how much she's eating, all about her kids. So we'll know her whole family history. And then genetically, we can help our farmers by, like, we've given away a lot of butt kids to our farms so that they can use those genetics of our best milk producers to improve their farms. So it's a lot of science, really, in cheese making and animal husbandry these days.
So I know you don't have a Goat of the Month program, but I know that your employees have lots of advantages and opportunities in terms of training. Can you just say a little bit about the employment opportunities and the kinds of jobs that exist here in Humboldt County?
Well, we feel that we want to do as much internal PR as external PR. So we really value our employees so much. We have an Employee of the Month program. We try and promote from within whenever we can. Through the whole recession, we continued to add employees. So we never stopped growing during the difficult times. And I think it's just a matter of always, like Ron said, you're never satisfied with a great marimba or a great piece of cheese or a great hydroponic system. You're always improving. And I think that's really important.
Michael, tell us a little bit about the kinds of jobs that you need to make your successful products.
Well, we need production people who can produce products. We have vacuum forming machines, tools, metal cutting. We need salespeople who understand hydroponic systems, know engineering, know horticultural practices, and understand lighting, temperature, humidity. We need managers who understand all the cash flow and strategic planning, hitting targets. So it's between that group of people, that kind of makes a team that can pull this off. And usually the weak link is where all our energy goes. And in order to find that talent is really difficult, especially horticultural knowledge. That's usually something that's years and years and years of experience in the variables that Mary's talking about, from animal husbandry to processing cheese. Well, In hydroponics, there's a relationship with humidity, temperature, the plant in cultivation, the markets, growing speeds, and you need people who really understand that, and that they're not easy to find.
So again, a lot of really fine recruiting and nurturing all along the way. And Ron, I know you have a whole different set of skills required for your work. Can you just say briefly some of the things that you look for and need to nurture at Marimba One?
For the building of the Marimbas, I always look for someone who's really curious and interested. And only some of the skills are standardized, such as basic woodworking skills. But in terms of tuning, that's totally unique. No one would probably ever come to us who has tuning skills for the tone bars or the resonators. I look for people who are really problem solvers and with a love of musical instruments. That's really the core of it.
Fascinating. I want to thank you very much, Mary Keehn and Michael Christian and Ron Samuels. Here's such good examples of what's possible if you have an idea that you may initially think is just a crazy idea and could never come to fruition. And you've demonstrated sort of the need for having that deep inspiration and the willingness to get past all those chapters, to not always do it the same way. It doesn't work. What was your expression?
We'll never do it that way again.
We'll never do it that way again,
Yeah.
Which seems like a motto that could probably apply for all three of you. And I want to thank you, and really proud and pleased that you are a part of our community. And thank you for being here.